These days, we are generally making a lot of statements, discussions. Everyone is discussing Trump. He is saying so harshly that Zelensky should run for office, that his rating is 4%. The Europeans are criticizing Trump a lot for all these statements. And in general, there are already opinions that the current approach of the US president, rather, plays into Russia's hands. Do you think this is really so? I think it is absolutely not so. I have my own point of view on this matter. It is the opposite of what you have just stated. The fact is that the current head of the Kiev regime is becoming a toxic figure for the armed forces of Ukraine because he gives absurd orders, dictated not by military considerations, but by political considerations, and it is unclear what they are based on. And this leads to unjustifiably large losses, if not to say, to very large or catastrophic losses for the Ukrainian army. He is becoming toxic for society as a whole. And this, in my opinion, is evidenced by today's vote in the Verkhovna Rada to extend his powers. Finally, he drove himself into a dead end with a decree banning negotiations with the Russian Federation on a peace treaty. He stopped these negotiations. And what's the matter? The matter is that he is avoiding these negotiations. Why? Because if these negotiations begin, sooner or later, and most likely quite quickly, this will lead to the need to lift martial law. And as soon as this happens, he will immediately have to go to the elections. Then there will be no reason not to hold elections, because today elections in Ukraine are not held under the pretext of martial law. And if there are negotiations, then there will be a possible quick need to lift martial law. Then he will immediately have to go to the elections. And here the current head of the Kiev regime has a problem. Because in fact it does not matter how many percents he has in the rating, for or another. Another thing is important. His rating, according to our data, is objective. And it is exactly 2 times less than that of his possible closest political rival. This is Mr. Zelensky, the former commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, whom they exiled to London. His rating is exactly twice as high. And if we add to this the possible support of this possible candidate from other political figures, including former prime ministers or former presidents, then the current head of the Kiev regime has absolutely no chance of winning the elections. His chances are 0. But, of course, this is only if something is not grossly rigged. But this is also bad for him, because it will be very noticeable. Therefore, he is a factor in the disintegration of the army, society, and the state. And the current U.S. President Trump certainly understands this and is pushing him to the elections. He wants to do the following. As it seems to me, he wants to improve the situation, the political situation in Ukraine, consolidate society, create conditions for the survival of the Ukrainian state. And in general, this is not so much for the benefit of Russia. We still have a conflict with the current regime, as it is for the benefit of Ukraine itself. Among other things, the current U.S. president has declared that he wants to achieve peace. And by the way, so do we, and as quickly as possible. And the current head of the Kiev regime is an obstacle to achieving this goal. This is where the position of the President of the United States, as it seems to me, comes from. And it is not connected with the fact that this is in our Russian interests. Most likely, it is in the interest of Ukraine, the Ukrainian state, with the goal of preserving Ukrainian statehood. We have nothing against this either. Although, of course, we would like this territory not to be used as a springboard for an attack on the Russian Federation. not to be used as a hostile springboard for us, so that ultimately it turns into a friendly neighboring state. Every day we hear many different statements from Trump. You have met with him more than once. You recently had a telephone conversation. Does he act on emotions? Of course not. Naturally, the current head of the regime in Kiev gives a reason to show these emotions. But from what I have just said, something completely different emerges. These actions of Trump are based, rather, not on emotions, but on cold calculation, on a rational approach to the current situation. In the current situation, oddly enough, frankly speaking, we were interested in Zelensky continuing to decompose the Kiev regime, with which we are in armed conflict. And from the point of view of the interests of strengthening Ukrainian statehood, of course, here we need to act, apparently, more energetically and in a completely different direction. It is necessary to bring to power people who will enjoy the trust of the people of Ukraine. And do the Europeans even understand, in your opinion, the essence of the current alignment around Ukraine? Well, you should ask them. Judging by the way they act, it seems to me that they do not really understand it. But that is not even the point. The point is that, unlike the new President of the United States, the political leaders of European states are connected with the current Kiev regime. They're engaged. And they have said and promised too much. And now, excuse the simplicity of expression, it is very difficult or almost impossible for them to steer away from this position without losing face. And considering that they are in a rather difficult and responsible domestic political period for them, elections, re-elections, they have difficulties in parliament, and so on, then, given these circumstances, it is practically impossible for them to change their position. Unlike them, the current President of the United States, the new president, the newly elected president, his hands are untied. He is free from these networks that do not allow him to move forward and work towards resolving the conflict. And in his character, he probably has the ability to act straightforwardly and without any particular embarrassment. He is in a unique position. He does not just say what he thinks. He says what he wants. Well, this is the